The world watched in disbelief as the date turned to June 13, 2025. For years, the simmering tensions between Israel and Iran felt like a distant drumbeat, a constant but manageable threat. But on that Friday, the drums of war grew deafeningly loud. News alerts flashed across screens globally, announcing that a direct, large-scale conflict had finally erupted. The long-feared shadow war had burst into the open, pulling the Middle East and indeed the entire world to the very brink of a catastrophic new chapter. The quiet anxieties of diplomats and analysts transformed overnight into the stark, terrifying reality of open warfare, a scenario many had worked tirelessly to prevent, but now had to confront. Across the globe, a wave of shock and alarm took hold. In New York, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session, the air thick with condemnation and desperate calls for de-escalation. In Moscow, President Putin placed a call to former U.S. President Trump, offering to mediate while denouncing the initial Israeli attack. Financial markets reacted with predictable panic. The price of oil skyrocketed, sending tremors through the global economy and threatening to drive up costs for families thousands of miles away from the conflict zone. The carefully constructed world of international diplomacy seemed to shatter in an instant, replaced by the chaotic and unpredictable logic of war. For ordinary people, the news brought a sudden and chilling sense of vulnerability. International air travel was thrown into chaos as airspace over both Israel and Iran was shut down. Major airlines were forced to cancel or reroute an estimated 3,000 flights, leaving travelers stranded and severing vital connections. In Tel Aviv and Tehran, the abstract language of geopolitics became a terrifying immediate threat. The daily routines of life were shattered by the piercing wail of air raid sirens and the gut-wrenching thud of distant explosions, forcing families to make impossible choices about their safety and their future in a region now engulfed by flames. This wasn't a conflict that began without warning, but its arrival was no less jarring. For months, tensions had been escalating, fueled by a 60-day ultimatum from the United States to Iran over its nuclear program. That deadline had expired, and the world held its breath. Israel, citing an existential threat, decided it could wait no longer. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's words echoed with grim determination. "We will strike every site and every target of the Ayatollah's regime." What they have felt until now is nothing compared to what they will feel. The long shadow war was over. A direct and brutal confrontation had begun, leaving the world to wonder how it would ever end. The first blow was swift and devastating. In the pre-dawn hours of June 12, the Israeli Defense Forces launched Operation Rising Lion, a massive and highly coordinated air campaign. Israeli jets, operating with what the IDF later called freedom of action, soared over Iranian skies, including the capital city of Tehran, for 2 hours. Their mission was clear and audacious: to degrade, destroy, and permanently remove the threat of a nuclear-armed Iran. Over 150 targets across the country were struck in a meticulously planned operation designed to cripple Iran's most sensitive military and nuclear infrastructure before it could react, marking a dramatic escalation in the long-running covert war. The primary targets were the crown jewels of Iran's nuclear program. At Natanz, the above-ground pilot fuel enrichment plant, home to over 1,700 advanced centrifuges, was reduced to rubble. In Isfahan, key infrastructure for producing metallic uranium, a critical component for a nuclear weapon, was also hit. While the International Atomic Energy Agency reported no elevated radiation levels, the damage was undeniable. The strikes were a clear message, aimed not just at destroying hardware but at shattering Iran's nuclear ambitions for the foreseeable future. The operation was a high-stakes gamble, executed with stunning military precision under the watchful eyes of a nervous world. Beyond the nuclear sites, Israel's campaign aimed to decapitate Iran's military and scientific leadership. According to Israeli intelligence reports, the strikes successfully killed 9 senior Iranian nuclear scientists, including the former head of Iran's atomic energy organization, Faridun Abbasi. In a parallel effort to disrupt command and control, 4 top security chiefs were also eliminated, among them General Mohammad Bagheri and General Hossein Salami. Unconfirmed reports circulated about the death of the IRGC Quds force commander, Esmail Ghani. This was a targeted effort to sow chaos and remove the very architects of Iran's military and nuclear strategy from the board. The assault extended to Iran's conventional military and economic lifelines. A major missile base in Kermanshah province was heavily damaged, along with the Tabriz Air Base and parts of Tehran's Mehrabad International Airport. Recognizing the importance of Iran's economy in funding its military, Israeli forces also targeted crucial energy infrastructure, including the massive South Pars gas field and the Asaluya refinery. The message was unequivocal: no part of the Iranian regime's power structure was safe. Operation Rising Lion was not just a military strike, it was a comprehensive effort to dismantle the pillars of Iranian power from the air. Iran's response, when it came, was furious. Approximately 18 hours after the first Israeli bombs fell, the Iranian regime unleashed Operation True Promise 3. The skies over the Middle East lit up as Iran launched a multi-wave attack involving around 200 ballistic missiles and over 100 drones, all hurtling toward Israel. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei had declared that Israel had declared war on Iran, and this barrage was his promised revenge. The launch represented one of the largest and most sophisticated missile attacks in modern history, designed to overwhelm Israel's famed air defense systems and inflict a painful price for Operation Rising Lion. For citizens in Israel, the night of June 14th was filled with terror. Air raid sirens blared across major cities from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, sending families scrambling for bomb shelters. While Israel's Iron Dome and Arrow systems, bolstered by U.S. Thiad defenses, intercepted the vast majority of the incoming threats, they could not stop everything. At least 7 impacts were reported in Tel Aviv and its suburbs, including Rishon LeZion and Ramat Gan. The psychological impact was immense as the perceived shield of invincibility was pierced, bringing the horror of the war directly into Israeli homes and neighborhoods. The human cost of the retaliation was immediate and tragic. In the cities hit by missile fragments, at least 3 people were killed and over 41 were injured. The chaos of the interceptions also had unintended consequences. In the West Bank, where residents lack access to sophisticated warning systems or public shelters, at least 7 Palestinian children were injured by falling shrapnel from an intercepted missile. The war, started between 2 regional powers, was once again inflicting suffering on populations caught in the middle, highlighting the indiscriminate nature of modern aerial warfare and the vulnerability of civilians across the region. Despite the damage and panic, Iran's military objectives were only partially met. Most of its missiles were aimed at Israeli military sites and airbases, in an attempt to cripple the very forces that had attacked them hours earlier. However, the high interception rate meant that the operational damage to the IDF was limited. All of the launched drones were reportedly shot down before they could even enter Israeli airspace. Yet for Iran, the attack was also a statement. It demonstrated a capability and a willingness to strike Israel directly, a red line that had never been crossed on this scale before, ensuring the conflict would only deepen. The war instantly sent shockwaves far beyond the Middle East, creating a humanitarian crisis that rippled across borders. In Iran, the Israeli strikes left a devastating toll, with at least 78 people killed and over 320 injured. A single strike on a residential building in Tehran reportedly killed 60 people, including 20 children, turning a neighborhood into a scene of unimaginable grief. In both nations, fear became a part of daily life. Civilians rushed to stock up on essentials, while aid convoys were blocked, halting the flow of life-saving supplies. In Gaza, the conflict brought aid distribution to a complete standstill, causing food prices to soar for a population already on the brink. The international response was a frantic scramble to contain a conflict spiraling out of control. The United States, under President Trump, clarified its position. It was aware of Israel's plans but did not participate militarily, though it vowed to defend Israel if attacked. The USS Thomas Hudner, a destroyer, was moved to the Mediterranean to help with missile defense. Meanwhile, diplomatic channels froze. U.S.-Iran nuclear talks scheduled for June 15th in Oman were abruptly cancelled. Iran declared it would not return to the negotiating table until the Israeli attacks ceased, leaving diplomacy in a state of suspended animation while the fighting raged on. As world leaders met and debated, analysts and experts weighed the terrifying possibilities of what could come next. One scenario involves a fragile, brokered peace. Under immense international pressure, both sides might agree to a ceasefire, pulling back from the brink to prevent an even wider regional war. This would likely involve intense back-channel negotiations, possibly mediated by powers like Russia or neutral states, but would leave the core issues of Iran's nuclear program and regional influence unresolved. Peace would be temporary, a pause in a conflict that could easily reignite. A second, more likely path is a protracted, simmering conflict. Israel has indicated its air campaign could last for weeks, continuing to strike targets to further degrade Iran's capabilities. In turn, Iran, having already demonstrated its willingness to retaliate, would likely continue launching missile and drone attacks, creating a bloody new normal of cross-border strikes. This war of attrition would inflict a terrible and ongoing cost on civilians in both countries, destabilizing the region for the foreseeable future and keeping the world on a knife's edge. The conflict would become a grinding, long-term struggle with no clear victor, only continued loss and destruction.